G'day friends, it's Andrew Turner here. I'm one of the leaders at West Beach Community Church. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you. I'm only sorry that we can't be doing this face to face all together, but we make the most of the time that we do have and the means that we do have to explore together just how wonderful Jesus Christ is and what it means to belong to Him and His kingdom. Let me say something very profound and perhaps a bit obvious at the front, but I want to affirm that Jesus is really, really good. And you might think, yeah, duh, Andrew. Well, of course, you have to go to Bible college to learn that, but it so easily creeps into our minds. It sort of comes sideways into our hearts. The idea that God's not really good, that He doesn't have our best interests at heart, that somehow He wants to hem us in and diminish our lives and spoil our fun and prick our bubble. And this was a lie that is whispered in the ears of humans right from the very beginning. Does God really have your best interests at heart? And I want to say that He does. He laid down His life for you. He genuinely cares for you. And Jesus said, the thief comes to kill and to steal and to destroy. I have come that you might have life and have it to the full. And He's like that. So at West Beach, we don't believe that Jesus looks out across our neighbourhood and says, "You naughty people out there, doing all your recreation, stop doing that. Stop your giggling. Stop your messing around. Come back, come in here, and I'll sort you out, and we'll get you all in order." We don't think that he's like that, and so we don't take that posture towards our neighbourhood. He wants people to have life to the full. We affirm people's quest for happiness, for peace, for what the Bible calls shalom, for everything in its right place, for security. I mean, He wants to give all these things, and it's only sad that people are looking for that in all the wrong places. And we want to say, come and find that in Jesus there is life to the full. And so the motto of our church, let's put it on screen there, West Beach Community Church, so much more to life, is what we want to invite people to come and to explore. And so we're doing this little sermon series over these weeks. There's so much more to life than ... Last week it was social media. And this week we're going to explore how there's so much more to life than home ownership. And so let's think about that together. I don't know how many of you have got the realestate.com app or one of the other brands, and there a lot of people have it on their phone. In Australia, it's a really important thing for a lot of people, especially I've got friends interstate. They just want to talk about nothing else than the real estate game and what prices are doing and where the market's at and how you can move up from this place that you've got to the next place. And they talk about it more than sport, more than the weather even. It's this frenzy. It's this grand interest, and it becomes captivating as well. And people are always flicking through, seeing what's available, seeing what the market is doing as well. And also, I think, seeing who really should have been doing this sermon, Mick. But you've given it to me, and so I'll do my best with it. Seriously, though, this is such an obsession for so many people, and especially as in a wealthy nation with people that have got considerable wealth. This can become an obsession, and it is. We say that's so captivating because it really can take people captive. As people try to play the real estate game, they can get themselves into immense amounts of debt, working so many jobs that it's effectively slavery, sacrificing family and other things that are just so important, overworking, or perhaps working in areas that they're doing the wrong sort of work, not what they were really made for as well, but instead doing something else that's higher paying because we sacrifice that all on the altar of the real estate game. And one of the great things that gets sacrificed for just trying to get ahead and to get that footprint in the market as well, of course, is people's well-being and mental health. It's amazing this treadmill that people get on and effectively enslave themselves and do harm to themselves and to others, all for the sake of this home ownership game. Let's try to get a bit of perspective on that together, and I hope this would be of some help. May well be of some challenge to all of us. So if we come to a Christian perspective, we might ask the question then, well, do we need to give up all our possessions in order to be a Christian? I mean, if we just peruse some of the texts here, let's have a look at a couple of verses. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field." It sounds a bit like Jesus is saying, if you really want the kingdom of heaven, then you've got to give up everything else that you have. And he is in a way. Let's explore this a little bit further. But do note from this story how Jesus says in his joy, he went and sold all he had and bought that field. It wasn't out of a heavy sense of duty. It was because he'd found something so much better than that. This is from Luke chapter 9. As they were walking along the road, a man said to Jesus, "I'll follow you wherever you go." And Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Seems Jesus is not a homeowner. As a carpenter, may have been a home builder. But what is Jesus saying then? If you really want to follow me as well, you can't have any home, can't have any possession. We see not only in the Gospels, we see in the book of Acts, and the Holy Spirit falls on people, and God pours out his love into their hearts. And one of the many responses that people have to that is selling property that they've got and giving it to the poor, selling property and putting it into the common pool to care for the poor, and doing things like that. We see that not only in the book of Acts at the very start of the church, but all the way through church history. There's been Christians who have renounced ownership of things, taken vows of poverty so that they can serve Christ. And it begs the question, of course, is that what you'd have to do in order to really be a real Christian? And are the rest of us who own anything only half Christian and sort of massively compromised? And of course the answer to that may well be yes. So we're all in formation. But you might imagine a conversation where you ask Jesus, and this is a great thing to do, of course, with your dilemmas in life, to talk to the Lord, ask him about the big decisions that you have to make. And you can imagine a conversation saying, "Lord, if I want to belong to you, do I have to give up my house? Do I have to give up my family? Do I have to give up my car, my computer, my golf clubs, all the things that I like the most? Do I really have to give you all those things?" By the way, just the way that question is shaped, isn't it interesting? It makes it sound like Jesus is the great taker and we are the big givers. It's really actually the other way around. But let's hold that thought. And so this question is put to Jesus. Do I have to really give up all these things of mine? And I think Jesus' fundamental answer to that would be to say, Andrew, actually what I want you to realize is that none of those things were ever really yours. You see, we've got to get our brains around what it actually really means to own anything. And when you become a Christian, and as the Lord opens our hearts and our minds to be able to see things the right way up, it gives us a whole different perspective on things. And so let's look at another parable, another story that Jesus told to get a perspective on what it means to own stuff. This is from Matthew 24. Jesus said, "Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household, to give them their food at the proper time?" So who is this servant who's been given charge of the other servants to make sure they're well fed? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, "Oh, my master is staying away a long time." And then he begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and to drink with the drunkards. Well, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and in an hour he is not aware of. And he will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is a choose your own adventure parable. Some of you heard me talk about it before. I think it's really significant for Westerners, especially as we think about what it means to have stuff, to have wealth. is this core idea that it's actually all belongs to God. We're not the ones who made it. We're custodians, and I want to say that ownership is really just stewardship. Ownership is really just responsibility. And in that story, that servant who's been entrusted with the keys to the whole pantry and all that food and all that drink, as long as he realizes it's for everyone else and he diligently goes about that, the task that's been, the responsibility that's been entrusted to him, and is doing that and feeding and blessing the other servants, fantastic. There's a great reward in that. But it all goes wrong when that servant begins to think that it's all for him and he can use it on himself and neglect the others that are around him, and that's when it all goes horribly wrong. So let's think about this idea that all ownership is really just responsibility. Now, do you really want to own as much as you possibly can? Have a vast portfolio? Would you like to own half the world and then be responsible for all of that? It begins to tip over the way that we think about things. Sometimes when we want to own property and we want to own lots of property, it's for security reasons as well. We want to make sure for every contingency as the decades unfold ahead of us that nothing can possibly go wrong and there'll always be a fallback sort of position. It depends what happens with that extra property. If you've got an extra property and you leave it there empty just in case, just so that you can use it as well, there's an account to be given to the Lord, and especially there's a lot of poverty in the world, a lot of homelessness in the world, and to say, you know what, I had three homes, and the question, of course, will be, what did you do with it? All ownership is responsibility. We've got to be very much aware of the dangers of hoarding it. Maybe you've seen little kids. I've seen this played out many a time, where there's a child who owns a toy and doesn't want to play with it. But as soon as some other kid comes along and picks it up and wants to play with it, this child gets mightily offended. It's like, no, that's mine. You can't play with it as well. It's like, I don't want to play with it. I just want to reserve the right to deny you the ability to play with it. And any adult in that situation sort of steps in and says, no, you weren't playing with it. Why couldn't this other child have a little play with it? I mean, we instantly know that's not just. As well. And yet, as grown-ups, we can end up doing the same thing. We want to fence off possessions, reserve them for our own personal use, just in case. We don't really want to use them all the time. We just want to be able to use them, and we want them to deny them to everyone else. And I think that is dangerous territory before our Father in heaven. So we've got to be careful about hoarding and just accumulating without a purpose, a real purpose behind it, a noble purpose that is behind it. Many moons ago, I did a degree in economics, but the way I often like to try to think about these things is to reduce it down to imagining 100 people living together on an island. Imagine that we've just landed on this island and there's a mad scramble of the 100 of us to divide it up into who gets what, who gets to live where on the island, and I'm going to race up the hill to where there's a really amazing view and try and grab the best spot on the island and peg it off and reserve it and say, this is going to be my part of the island. And so I settle in. I quickly realised, of course, that there's no running water up there, and every single day I've got to go all the way down the hill, right down to the bottom to the creek and get water, and then I've got to lug it all the way back. And after a while I get sort of disenchanted with this hilltop property of mine, and I look down the hill and I see some people have got their place right there, right next to the creek, and I really want to have theirs. I don't want to have mine, and so I try to figure out, is there a way I can arrange a swap with people and I can get people to come up and I can say how magnificent the view is, so that I find some other sucker to come and get this property, so I can go down to move to that property. And imagine 100 people on the island, and all of them are trying to just look at where the fences are and move them around and try to figure out, I'll have this bit and no, you have that bit as well. And as long as you're playing that game and attending to where the fences should be and where the lines should be marked and who gets to be in which patch as well, nobody's sowing, nobody's planting any crops, nobody's fishing, nobody's enhancing the total wealth of the whole island. We're just trying to argue over where the lines are drawn and who gets to reserve what. And you can be drawn into that wherever you find yourself, you can always to look at some other person's situation or some other property and think, oh, I really want to be there. The grass is always greener on the other side. And a saying that I really like is, if the grass is always greener on the other side, it's because your neighbour stayed home and watered their lawn. Let's think about that for a minute. Imagine on the island if we were content with what we already had and invested in that, um, made it better, made it fit with all the other things that were around us, and helped one another to invest in this island and to make it as good as it possibly can be, and to work for us collectively. How much more important that would be, instead of fighting over where the boundaries are drawn. So we've got to be wary of how we get so easily sucked in to playing those games, which is not real life. There is so much more to life. If you are in a place of home ownership or even renting a place, and what is in your hands to look after, how can you attend to that? How can you kind of water the lawn of your life and improve it for others? And that's worship to God, as you decide to look after what's been entrusted to you and to do really well with that, and not always be looking at what other people have got. The Turner family were in the middle of making a bit of a real estate shift and going to sell a house and getting ready to build a house as well. It's not because of trying to get richer. It's not because we really want to try and live in somewhere else. Our project is precisely because we're not making the most out of the place that we have. There's empty rooms, and there's a ridiculous amount of gardening and maintenance and things that we weren't especially built for, not especially good at as well. We want to simplify our setting. We just want to simplify, downsize, simplify our lives, so we've got more time for the more important things, and the contribution that we think God has called us to make. And that's the framework with which we try to look at things, because all ownership is just responsibility, as we've said. Okay, so in conclusion, isn't it funny how it gets called real estate? Even there's a sales pitch just even in the phrase, as if real estate is the realest thing there could possibly be, as if real estate is the most secure thing and the thing that matters the most. And friends, it's not. There's so much more to life than owning real estate. Don't be sucked into that. If you're looking for real security, if you're looking for real peace, if you're looking for real meaning in life, if you're looking for real happiness, for real shalom, real well-being, not just for you, but those people who are around you, then the best move you can possibly make is to find your place in God's family, in God's kingdom, and to find the security of having as your core identity that you're a child of His and He's always going to look after you. You don't have to prove yourself. It releases you from the game of having to try to maximize your life and make yourself to seem more important. God thinks you're incredibly important. Find your place in Him, and you begin to find what we mean when we say there's so much more to life than all the other stuff that we've been talking about. And you will find it incredibly rewarding. You'll find it incredibly noble. It's something to get up in the morning for, not to try and get your portfolio to grow just that little bit more as well. You're not living for yourself, but you're getting up in the morning to improve the world, to bless others, to build others up, to work collectively with them, and to honour God and to worship God with every hour that we have, and with all that's been put into our hands to make. This is the best investment that you can make ever. So Lord, help us with that. Help us to see things the right way up. Help us to live under your authority, with your perspective, our lives oriented to you, to be able to attend to the big and small decisions that we make in a truly wise way, and in a way that gives life and brings shalom and honours you. Friends, I can feel a song coming on. It's all right, don't panic. I'm not going to sing, but there's an old chorus that I think could be like the theme song for this whole series. But I'd like to change one of the lines. Very simple song. Many of you will know it. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. My only problem is with the third line there. The things of earth will grow strangely dim. I don't think when you come to Jesus, he wants everything else to just fade away and become totally unimportant. It doesn't quite work like that. He's very interested in the world. Um, and the things of earth, commerce, business, even property, sport, the arts, your family. God loves all this and wants to see it come to life and wants to see it really thrive. And so let's just change that third line. Let's sing, turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth take their rightful place in the light of his glory and grace. Amen. Thanks for watching. The Lord bless you, and there'll be more next week.